Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Empty Cloud Monastery. So my name is Bhante Sudaso, and I'm here with Tan Wade from Wat Mapjan in Thailand. This is our weekly monk chat, so the weekly opportunity to ask any questions you might have related to Buddhism, especially anything that came to mind during the previous live streams this week, which were off topic. This is your chance to ask anything you want because there is no topic. So everything is on topic this evening. So we'll start by paying homage to the Buddha, and then we'll go through whatever questions might appear. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So, as questions appear, we'll answer questions. So hello to the people checking in online. So hello to Rick, Egod, Karen, Manal, Christina, Jazzled, Andy, Jayanta, Kumu, Gayatri, and Richard. And also hello to Teddy, so the monastery cat who's also joining in. And also to our lay residents who are here at the monastery. Hello, Mary, so our neighbor who was here earlier today, and Eric, good to see all of you. However, what I don't see is any questions. So if there's no questions, then there's no monk chat, which could be the shortest monk chat session ever. So far, it's never actually happened that there were no questions. So tonight might be the first night. So unless there's somebody here at the monastery who has a question, there's no questions from online. Anything?
Maybe there's one question.
Go ahead.
I was thinking about allowables earlier, and I was wondering if honeycomb is also allowable.
What do you think?
Let's see. I actually don't know. I don't even know what honeycomb is composed of, to tell you the truth.
Honey and beeswax.
Beeswax, so wax. The question would be about wax, right?
You know, I could see arguments both ways. Somehow this question has never come up, but I'm inclined to say that yes, it probably would be allowable because modern honey filtration is probably way more advanced than what they were using in ancient India. So I suspect that for most of human history, it was just normal that there was a certain amount of beeswax and honeycomb mixed in with your honey. So if that was a problem, the Buddha probably would have said something. So since the Buddha didn't say anything about it, I would conclude that honeycomb isn't a problem. That would be the flexible argument. The non-flexible argument would be that beeswax is food and therefore only filtered honey would be allowable and honeycomb only in the morning. But I'm more inclined towards the more flexible interpretation that honeycomb is just part of a feature of honey and therefore allowable.
What I thought as well, but I know that it can get tricky.
Yeah, actually, the subject of allowables is where there's some of the least common ground across different Theravada monasteries. Everyone has their own opinions about what is and is not permissible. So, Louisa has a question online. So Louisa says, does Buddhist practice lead to no feelings? I find the more I practice, the less feelings I have. Is this equanimity? I like it. Tan Wade, what do you think?
Okay. Bhante, does Buddhist practice lead to no feelings? Okay. So this is different. Would be emotions, I think, as opposed to like physical sensations, right? Lead to no. Does it lead to no feelings as as in the end, the kind of the goal of the practice, would that be no feelings? But you're saying that now already you're experiencing a reduction in various emotional states and experiencing more equanimity. Well, it says in the suttas that peace is the highest pleasure. Okay, and so this feels really good in the heart, according to the suttas. And so, and the masters say that, so if you attain enlightenment, then you'll have the very highest pleasure, kind of consistently right there in your heart. This is I guess a kind of feeling, as opposed to a physical sensation feeling, kind of a mental state. Along the way, in the practice of concentration, for example, you can experience piti, kind of euphoria or ecstasy. You can also experience sukha, which is which would be, I guess, kind of like a physical feeling, the body becoming physically comfortable. There could be a question as to whether PT is a physical sensation or not. And this is actually akin to one of the speculative views in the suttas. But I think what we could say is that Buddhist practice would lead to hopefully a gradual reduction in unskillful mental states, the defilements, and an increase in skillful mental states. Although sometimes, even after years of practice, you can be many practitioners are quite surprised at the defilements that can arise unexpectedly. But gradually, kind of generally speaking, a reduction in unskillful mental states and an increase in skillful mental states. It's a general answer.
Great, wonderful, thank you. And then we have a series of questions about celibacy, which is interesting. So first, Joe says, can you talk about celibacy? What did you find about the practice that was better than sex? Equanimity. Equanimity is far more delicious than any sensual pleasure, including sexual activity. There's really nothing beats contentment. Actually, the Buddha himself said contentment is the highest happiness. So learning how to enjoy just sitting quietly doing nothing and not needing anything other than that, and appreciating the peacefulness of mind that comes from not wanting anything at all. That is far, far better than sexual activity. Also, deep states of samadhi. So as one's mind becomes extremely steady and clear, then it also becomes extremely blissful. So deep states of samadhi also produce a much more pleasurable experience than sensual pleasure of any sort, which, again, I really don't know why people are so fixated on sex in particular. Compared to the states of mind that can be achieved through spiritual practice, sex is actually quite unsatisfying, quite minimal. But I guess if one lacks the standard of comparison, it might seem like the best thing. Think kind of like how I had my idea of what the best pizza was until I actually went to Italy, and then I realized that I actually had no idea. And everything I had had up until then was kind of like pale, cheap knockoff, which was really nothing like the real thing. Kind of vaguely resembled the real thing. So it's kind of the same. If your idea of pleasure is sexuality, that's kind of like thinking that pizza means that stuff you get at Pizza Hut. And then one day you go to Italy, which in this clunky metaphor would be, for example, deep samadhi or very strong equanimity. And then you discover what it really is. Did that metaphor make any sense?
I think that was an excellent metaphor.
Okay, great.
It was great.
Yeah. For the record, pizza is also not happiness. Contentment is also superior. Here's another question, again related to sexuality, which seems to be a hot topic this evening. So Christina says, how did Nanda's mother become a once returner? She was married, not celibate, and a layperson.
Oh, okay. Asking about her in particular. Well, Well, that's a great question. I have to say I don't know the answer, except in a general sense that that these things depend upon how much spiritual virtue you have. I think is the kind of the general answer the meditation masters would give. So, how long it takes someone to attain high levels of meditation practice or path and fruit, and what situations they can attain, it comes down in part to how much spiritual virtue that they have. So. There are stories of many disciples in the suttas and the commentaries attaining path and fruit and even enlightenment in situations that seem, extremely fast or difficult to do so. There's a story of one monk who attained enlightenment while he was being eaten by a tiger. There's a story of which I wish I could remember his name. The disciple who attained enlightenment the fastest in the Buddha's dispensation, who attained enlightenment all the way to arahantship, in a short, while listening to a very short instruction from the Buddha, it probably took only less than a minute to deliver. He attained all the way up to arahantship. They say that this is because of the tremendous spiritual virtue he had accumulated, the parami, over time, with the determination to be the disciple who attained enlightenment the quickest in the Buddhist dispensation. So I guess that's what it would come down to. That, perhaps in the case of Nanda, that she had accumulated so much virtue that she could attain all the way up to anagami, even in this kind of situation.
Yeah, I would also just add here. So it says here that Nandamata was a once returner. So I actually don't recall the specific case of Nandamata. I'd have to look up the suttas about Nandamata. But just pointing out that sexual desire does not completely disappear until one reaches the stage of non-returner. So it is not impossible for a stream enterer or once returner to be non-celibate. Though, of course, practicing celibacy helps one to attain stages of awakening. That's part of, well, actually, it's the reason why Buddhist monks do it. It's the main reason anyway. But it is still possible to reach the first two stages without necessarily being celibate. More difficult, of course, but possible. Now, there's a number of cases in the suttas of non-celibate people becoming stream enterers or once returners, including a couple of cases of prostitutes becoming stream enterers. So clearly, celibacy is not a requirement for the first two stages of awakening. And Eric, continuing on the theme that seems to be emerging this Friday evening, Eric says, can you give some advice on how to go about discerning the jumbled desires for a monastic and contemplative life, but also the desire to find love with a partner and have a family? Do you want to answer this one?
Okay.
You always give me this look of shock and surprise whenever I pass a question to you.
We're getting some really good questions. They make me stop and think, oh boy, I have to kind of come up with the right answer, I think sometimes is what I'm thinking. And hopefully Bhante Sudasa will take this one. So, well, that is quite a difficult. I think it's a difficult thing to go through that many of us go through along the path to figuring out if we want to be a monastic or a layperson, for example. And many monastics find themselves questioning over and over again, even for years in their monastic careers. I was telling a story earlier today to someone else that for years I'd wanted to ordain as a Buddhist monk, and I was it seemed as though I was getting close to my goal. And I'd been visiting a Bayagiri monastery out in California, and it looked like I was set up to stay there for quite a while. That I was going to be able to stay there as a lay guest and perhaps get onto the ordination track, and driving back home after a 3-day or week-long stay there. Thinking about this, I started to question: do I really want to do this? Am I sure? Well, what about if I did this instead, or what if I did that? And I caught myself. I said, wait a minute! I can't believe I'm doing this. Yeah. I've been trying to set this up for years, actually, moving my life in this direction. It's something I've wanted to do for so long, and now that it looks like it may become a reality, I'm second guessing it. My mind is going the other direction, And so I reflected on this, and I thought, well, whether I'm in lay life or if I'm in monastic life, the mind is always going to be changing. They say in Thailand, the mind has more twists and turns than the vines of the forest. They have some that circle down from the trees and in a spiral. They say the heart has more twists and turns than the vines of the forest, you know. And I thought, well, I think that in monastic life, it'll be a good situation, a better situation than in lay life for working with these twists and turns over the long run. And that's what put my mind at ease about going ahead with my monastic ambitions.
And Jason says, do you have any advice for one's practice feels stagnant? Well, when your practice feels stagnant, then make some changes. Do something different. Try out new meditation techniques or new meditation objects. Seek out new teachers. So these days there's a huge number of bhikkhus and bhikkhunis with teachings online. So find a new monastic and listen to someone you've never listened to before and see what it's like. It might really touch you in a new way. Or start thinking, what can I do to help out my community? So doing community service of some sort, looking to see what you can do to help out the people in your area. Look into senior citizen homes or go and visit people in long-term care in hospitals or something. Find some creative way to practice kindness and generosity. So these also are ways that can kind of revivify your practice. And of course, you should be reading the suttas cover to cover every single day. Though some people might find that increases their boredom level, but actually I find it just adds this huge spicing of zest and joy. So your mileage may vary on that last piece of advice. Okay, yeah.
That's great.
Okay. And Jayanta says, can you explain about Abhaya Dana, the gift of fearlessness? The Buddha said that this is the 5 precepts.
Right. We were talking about this actually last night, I think. Yeah. When you follow the 5 precepts, you give the 5 greatest gifts there are. I think is how it's phrased. The gifts, because each one, when you adopt a precept, you give the gift of fearlessness to all living beings.
Yeah. So do you want to explain that in detail?
Okay. See how much detail. I'm talking about all the. So I think it's specifically referred to in regard to the 5 precepts, and so we have the abstention from killing, and the abstention from stealing, from sexual misconduct, from lying, and from taking intoxicants. And I think we find this in our lives with people we have close to us, people we work with, people we live with, that if we have someone we trust, it feels really good. I think it says elsewhere in the scriptures that trust is the truest kinship. If you have trust with someone, then that feels really good. It feels safe. You feel like you have someone you can rely on. And that's you don't have to worry about what they'll do. And so this is the gift of fearlessness, I think.
And Vivek asks, does being a waiter fall into right livelihood? I wonder because of the fact that most restaurants serve meat and alcohol. Yeah, so this is a difficult thing. The great quest for right livelihood as a layperson. It's often less about finding 100% right livelihood as trying to get close to 100%. Many occupations are seemingly harmless, but actually cause harm in one way or another. So for example, you're working for a bank and then you find out that the bank invests heavily in weaponry. And not actually a surprise. You start digging into how your bank invests its money and you might find that your bank is actually mixed up in all kinds of unwholesome things, which are perfectly legal, but nonetheless are karmically unethical and irresponsible. So in this example, someone who's working in a restaurant, then that means that, if the restaurant sells alcohol and that person is in the position of serving alcohol to people, then that does mean that there's an element of wrong livelihood there. So there is, of course, a big difference between, say, working in a liquor store where 100% of what you're doing is selling alcohol, and your intention is clearly to sell alcohol. That's exclusively 100% wrong livelihood. Whereas in a restaurant, for example, maybe it's a restaurant where its primary purpose actually is just food, and alcohol is only a small fraction of what people consume while they're there. And someone goes there because they want to serve food to people. Well, it's still not completely pure livelihood. There's still a certain taint there because you are involved in selling alcohol. But it's much more mild than, for example, a liquor store. But ideally, you do want to try to have completely pure right livelihood. So this does mean that working as a server in a restaurant that serves alcohol is not quite completely pure livelihood. So it's a challenge. Often it's hard to find a job which is completely wholesome, but you do the best you can. Okay, here's another one for Tan Wade. So Kumo says, what is the connection between Swan Karma and the ability to receive merit from another person when they offer merit based on their good actions? Does merit received from another dilute bad karma?
Okay. I can only answer this based on what I've been told about receiving merit from others, from a meditation master, basically from one of the teachers who I had faith in, and he explained that when you receive merit from someone, you don't actually receive the good karma that's been done. What you receive is some kind of power and pleasure of mind that's somehow consequent to the good karma that was done. Okay, so for example, if someone shares merit with you, you might experience piti, kind of euphoria, or might experience the mind might become very tranquil, very calm. And so the meditation master said, in conversation, it came out, I can't remember exactly how it came out, but that, and so this may be this wholesome mental state that arises as a result of receiving the merit might serve as a basis for you also doing something good, which is good, doing your own good karma. So that's when we're receiving merit as a human being. If they say that sharing merit is very valuable when it comes to our parents and our karmic creditors, that is, those we've harmed in the past. So they say if they've passed away, and when I refer to the parents, for example, we should share merit with our departed parents and with karmic creditors, those we've harmed in the past, for their benefit in their future lives, basically. Especially if they've been reborn as ghosts, which we may not know, but they say it's kind of the general rule of thumb to share merit with those two kinds of beings, and could also with other relatives who've departed. So it's actually considered a regular Buddhist activity in Thailand, for example, to have a merit-making kind of ceremony and share the merit with someone who's departed, and then on an anniversary, for example, every year, you might return to the monastery and make merit and share the merit with departed parents, for example. There's a story from the Ajahn Chah lineage told about Ajahn Chah himself receiving merit. And this actually touches on another possible benefit of receiving merit that I'd forgotten for a moment there. The story is that Ajahn Chah was wandering in the wilds of Thailand from place to place, looking for secluded places to meditate, and then meditating for a while and moving on. And in his travels, he caught malaria, which was relatively common for the wandering monks in those days. And he became so ill that he kind of passed out one night with a very high fever. Because if you have malaria, you go through stages of the fever rising and becoming very, very high, and then going down. And so he had a very high fever, and he kind of passed out. And it is quite likely that he could have died. With malaria, this is a very serious illness. And but he woke up later on, and he felt completely refreshed and vibrant and energetic. It was a kind of a stunning recovery. Okay. And he was so surprised by this as he was reflecting on it, waking up and feeling so much better, as it really became clear to him what had happened, that he actually wrote it down in his journal and noted the date. Later on, he wandered back towards his home village, and he met up with his relatives again there in the home village. And after a time of being with them, he remembered this. And so he took out his journal and he asked them, "Did anything special happen on this day?" And his relatives said, "Yes, we thought that since we hadn't heard from you in so long, we thought that you must have died." Okay. And so we went to the monastery and we made merit, and we shared the merit with you. And that was the day.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. That's a beautiful story. I've never heard that one before. Thank you for sharing that story. That's delightful. Yeah, so share merit also with living people. They might need the help. And Chad says, can I use Buddhanusati, just recitation, not visualization or contemplation of qualities, as the basis for the 4 satipatthanas? Essentially, can Buddhanusati be a liberating practice? I have trouble with other objects like the breath. Okay. Not really. No. So I assume by just recitation, you mean just repeating the Buddha's name. No, that's not a satipatthana practice, and that's also not in and of itself a liberating practice. What that can do is it can help to prepare the mind for samadhi, in that it helps to clear away distracting thoughts. That's really its main function in the way that I think you're describing it. But it's not a satipatthana practice, and it's not a liberating practice. It's preparation for samadhi. So that's still useful. Many people get a lot of benefit from doing Buddha recitation practice as a way of prepping the mind for concentration. And if you are remembering that it is in fact the name of a Buddha and what a Buddha is, then that's also very useful practice, because it reminds you of what our role model is, what we're aspiring to be like. But it's not a satipatthana practice. I would say that if you're having trouble with doing breath meditation, well, then don't do breath meditation. There's dozens of different ways to meditate, dozens of different ways to do satipatthana. So if you don't have success with breath meditation, then don't do it. I almost never do breath meditation. So I almost always use other methods, mindfulness of the body, or the 6 elements, or metta, or animitta samadhi, or any of a few other techniques. So yeah, don't feel like you're obligated to use the breath. And if you get benefit from Buddha recitation, then that's fine, you can use it, but recognize that it's not a practice that will take you all the way to awakening. It's just a practice that will help prepare the mind for deeper meditation practices. So Richard asks, what are some of the most profound insights or realizations that you have personally gained through your practice thus far? And how has it impacted your life and understanding of non-self? Tan Wade?
We defer to Teddy, the monastery cat.
And if you ever really don't want to answer a question, you can just pass it back to me. Okay. But I think you can do this one.
Okay. Well, this is whenever I get a question like this, I don't want to necessarily answer it exactly as it's asked. one of the things for Buddhist monks is that we're kind of not really supposed to talk too much about our own practice and our own insights and things like this. And there's actually even a rule in the monastic code for monks in relation to this. And so, let's see. So I'm trying to think of what kind of thing might be useful to relate. Well, for example, the what I was talking about before about the mind going back and forth and around, and I think one thing about Buddhist practice is over time you gain more and more removed from this kind of process, or the spinning wheel of thoughts in the mind. And you can see the thoughts more and more clearly as being not self, I think. This is a great advantage because if we don't have mindfulness, then we get caught up in our thoughts, and we quite easily start believing them and following them around, or letting them push us around, and the various emotions that they turn up as well. If we can get more removed from this and become less reactive and become more proactive in life, separating out what's happening, what kind of sensory experience are we having? What are other people doing and saying? What's the weather really like? and not get so caught up in our emotions. We can be more proactive about how we relate to life, and have greater peace of mind, and act more skillfully.
Great. And Casey says, I observe when I practice mindfulness of body 3 layers: structural, bones; internal layer of flesh and organs; and the surface level of skin. This is great. If I'm focusing on body mindfulness, I can go in depth in all 3, but when I want to do a quick body scan before breath meditation, for example, I don't know which layer to focus on. Suggestions? Well, first off, I'm delighted by your description of mindfulness of the body. That's actually really, really lovely. And as for if you just want to do a quick scan, well, whichever layer the mind settles on most easily. So, of course, when you're doing mindfulness of the body, you want to have a complete and stable awareness of the body. But if you're just doing a quick sweep, well, then whatever feels appropriate. I wouldn't get too hung up on which one. I think probably the internal flesh and organs would, just off the top of my head, that seems like the one that's the most directly connected to breathing. Personally, to me, I actually don't really separate the bones from the internal flesh. To me, it's kind of all intermingled. Well, literally, it's intermingled. But I also don't really separate skin, because to me, skin, it just happens to be the visible layer. But it's, to me, the whole body is just one interconnected mass. But your way of subdividing it into 3 categories, if that's helpful for you, then yeah, definitely you can do it that way. So Sud says, are there any tricks you use to be kind or develop loving kindness towards those who your mind has considered to have lied and cheated you in the past? John Wade?
Sure. Yes. Well, this is quite a good question, because this is a very common human experience, I think. We oftentimes find ourselves cheek by jowl with somebody we might consider our arch enemy, even the worst person there is. And we had this little conversation last night, the Sangha panel about family harmony, and talking about how even in monastic situations it can seem like 80% of all the suffering in the world is caused by the monk sitting next to you. Of course, it can't, not on this case.
Only 20%.
So this is quite an important skill to have in life, being able to have loving kindness for even people who we may not feel like we get along with well, or who we feel like may have harmed us in the past. We may find ourselves really having to relate to them in life, even if we never wanted to again. So there are various kind of strategies that could be recommended. One is having a regular meditation practice, helping the mind over time to grow calmer and calmer, and to have more proactivity, as I was just kind of talking about. And another one is to remember an inspiring example. For example, one that I remember is the Jataka tale about the monkey who helped the man who fell into a pit in the forest. There's a story from the Jataka tales about a monkey came upon a man who fell in a pit, and he helped the man out of the pit. But the man had been stuck in the pit for a while, and he was very hungry. So when he had an opportunity, he took a rock, he took a stone, and hit the monkey in the head, hoping to kill the monkey so that he could eat the monkey. Well, the monkey got away. He escaped and climbed a tree nearby. But he kept an eye on the man. And he saw that the man was, having failed to kill the monkey, was looking for a way to get out of the forest. But he was lost, and he didn't know how to get out. And the monkey actually came down out of the tree to help this man who had just tried to kill him and led him out of the forest to safety. And so many times over the years, I've thought of this example. This is a story of one of the Jataka tales. And according to the tale, the monkey was the Buddha, the Gautama Buddha, in a past life. And the man was someone that the Buddha was to meet up with many more times in the round of rebirths. And the story is told in the context that in the process of doing this, the monkey had developed his spiritual virtue, his parami. And this served as a basis for his future attainment of Buddhahood. And so we can reflect whenever we have something difficult to do. If we can develop our spiritual virtues in the process, then we'll prosper. And so having loving kindness and developing other skillful mental states, even towards people that we have difficult time with, is even in our own best interest. One of the masters of Thailand said that we can even develop gratitude towards those who do us wrong, who do really bad things to us, because if we continue to develop skillful mental states in relation to those difficulties, then they're actually helping us. And so we can reflect on it in this way.
And Vivek says, how would you recommend determining if I am making progress on the path? Well, briefly speaking, if your wholesome qualities are increasing and your unwholesome qualities are decreasing, that's usually the way you can determine if you're making progress. Actually, often a way you can find this is if you go into a situation that you remember historically has been very triggering or upsetting or challenging for you, and you find that it's a little bit less triggering than it used to be. Don't expect complete purity of mind. If you go home to visit your family, then your brother is still going to annoy you. But you may find that he's slightly less annoying than he used to be 10 years ago. And it's probably not him. It's probably the result of your development of practice, the cultivation of equanimity and loving kindness. So this is really the way you judge: are my wholesome states stronger and my unwholesome states weaker? This is the main way you determine progress. And Let It Go, Let It Be says, how much time do you as monastics listen to other Dharma teachers online? Personally, 0. How about you?
It was 0, actually.
0, okay. That was easy. Eric says, do you have any advice on how to forgive those that have intentionally hurt you?
Oh.
You actually just answered this one.
That seems like you're the same.
Do you feel you answered this sufficiently with the previous question, or did you want to put a little more detail here?
I think maybe that's enough.
Okay. Yeah.
Looking at another strategy right now. Thank you.
Great. And Mano says, I finally began to sit for daily meditation. Congratulations. Good to hear it.
Sadhu.
And as I suspected, it's a freight train carrying thoughts in many compartments. Yes, it is. And she continues, I do guide myself back onto the breath. Is this to support single-mindedness? Yeah, so as you notice that you've gotten lost in thought, then you just bring attention back to your body. And over time, that will lead to greater control over your mind. Because every time you do that, you're training your mind to not follow whatever appears, and instead to be controlled and restrained and focused. So it's actually quite normal in the early stages of meditation practice. It's quite normal that the mind be full of all kinds of noise. It's also normal in the middle stages of meditation practice. So don't expect that to stop anytime soon. In fact, the big change is not necessarily when the thoughts stop, but rather when you just stop taking the thoughts seriously. You just see the thoughts as just being meaningless background noise. That's actually the really big transformation. It's of course you can force the thinking to stop. That is doable, but usually much more achievable is just to stop taking the thoughts seriously. Then they just won't distract you anymore. It's just background noise. Another question on merit. So since Wade's the master of merit transfer, we'll have him answer this one too. So Hasanta says, I have never understood transfer of merit. Surely the receiver would only receive the benefits originating from their own mind, not another's mind, given that the mind is the forerunner of all things.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's a great point. This person is obviously studied and they know some things. Perhaps this question was submitted about the same time as the other one, so they hadn't heard the previous answer yet, I think. And so, yes, again, according to the previous answer, it's interesting because sharing merit is not in the suttas, as I recall.
It's hinted at in a couple of places,
okay.
But it's gone into much more detail in the Apocrypha.
Okay.
So there's references to it in the suttas, but not in any detail.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it sounds like, kind of at first blush, it sounds like something that is kind of impossible. How can you share good karma with someone else? This kind of thing. We even chant, "I am the owner of my karma." It's one of the five subjects for frequent recollection. But it's attested to by the meditation masters, I can say, and some of what I'm saying is based on faith about exactly how it works. There are lots of practitioners who have some degree or other of personal experience that bolsters their faith in it. So I'm not sure what else to say. But again, it's not that you actually receive the good karma from someone, or that someone can experience the karmic fruit of the merit that's shared, but rather that it transfers some kind of pleasant mental state or power kind of mind that's resultant from the merit that was made. Okay.
And Julie says, as a layperson, what can we do to see our defilements, greed, and anger as they get more subtle over time? And is it important to catch everything to become an arhat? Is there anything our teacher can do to help us with this, or it needs to come from ourselves? Well, so ideally, as your practice develops, then you develop increasingly subtle, refined, and precise mindfulness of the mind, which means, therefore, you will be able to catch more subtle defilements. So as you clear away coarse defilements, then you will also develop more refined mindfulness in order to catch the more subtle defilements. So yes, your teachers can often help. Usually they help by pointing out your shortcomings, which is not always the most pleasant experience, but it can be very, very beneficial if you're receptive to it. But ultimately, you need to look at your own mind and see what's going on in there, and be very honest with yourself about what's going on in there. Usually we actually know. On some level, we actually know perfectly well when we're doing unwholesome things or thinking unwholesome thoughts. We just don't like to admit it to ourselves. So one of the most important qualities in this path is a willingness to be honest with ourselves, not justifying our unwholesome conduct of body, speech, and mind. So even if you're doing unwholesome things, at least be honest with yourself that that's what you're doing. So for example, people who like to steal from corporations, and they say like, oh, well, it's not really that big a deal. Corporations are evil and they won't notice a slight reduction in profit. There's not really anything wrong here. Well, no, just be honest. Yes, this is unwholesome. I'm doing something unwholesome. I probably shouldn't be doing this. In fact, I know I shouldn't be doing this. I'm doing it anyway, even though I know I shouldn't be doing it. At least be honest with yourself that you're doing something unwholesome, because that builds up wisdom, which eventually leads to self-restraint. Whereas if you try to fool yourself into believing that what you're doing is okay, then that generates delusion, which just leads to even more unwholesome behavior in the future. Okay, and TJ says, do you agree with Ajahn Buddhadasa that the term idappaccayata is used for all things in nature, and paticca is used for human dukkha in particular? I see. You want me to take this one? Okay. Well, I actually don't know exactly what Ajahn Buddhadasa said on this topic, so I can only go off what you're saying here. So, idappaccayata is the general statement of causality. When this is, that is, with the arising of this, there's the arising of that. When this is not, that is not, with the ceasing of this, there's the ceasing of that. So that is a universal principle that applies to all things. As for paticca is talking about the arising of dukkha, but not only human, but dukkha in any state of being fits into paticca. So it's not exclusively human dukkha, but it's also animal dukkha and deva dukkha and ghost dukkha and hell being dukkha and Brahma dukkha and all of that. It's all paticca dukkha. But yeah, I would agree with that as a general principle. Yeah. Where it gets a little more interesting is asking whether there's actually any difference between those two things. Because everything that's experienced is experienced within mind. So can we actually draw a distinction between natural phenomena and mental phenomena within sentient beings? And I think no. Personally, I think no. So I would say from one way, you can say, yes, idappaccayata is all natural phenomena, paticca is all sentient being dukkha. From another perspective, you can say that actually these are not two different things. They're just two ways of talking about the same thing. Kumu has another question about merit sharing for Tan Wade. This one says, lovely story to explain how merit works. Is it then a good idea to offer merit after any wholesome activity as much as we can, as there are so many in need of merit in this world and in many realms?
I'd say sure. As a general statement, yes. Let's see here. I wonder if I can add something to it. I might say that I've been told that amongst the conditions for sharing merit, one is you make merit, but also that how effective the merit sharing is depends on how calm your mind is, if you're the one sharing the merit. And so it may make sense to do some meditation or do some kind of an activity that makes the mind calm before sharing merit. And so some practitioners will do it as part of their daily meditation practice. After meditating, and then take the opportunity to share all of their merit with all living beings. A couple of other side notes on this is that actually sharing merit in and of itself is an act of good karma. And so we make more merit for ourselves when we share merit, so this is like a bonus. And that actually it's a relatively high level of a good karma because it's considered pavana. I once asked a meditation master, this is at least according to what I was told, I asked the meditation master, is sharing merit a form of generosity or is it a form of bhavana? And he says it would be bhavana. It would be
interesting. Yeah. I would just briefly add to this that in the Mahayana tradition, one of the 10 great vows of Samantabhadra Bodhisattva is to always share merit equally with all beings. So just an added bit there, I would say, yes, share merit with everyone. Because actually sharing merit only with your own relatives, well, really, that's it? Can't you go bigger? So it's not like you diminish the merit by sharing it more broadly.
Right.
And let it go, let it be clarifies, I assume, about the earlier question about listening to other monastics online.
All right.
I meant like Sujato, Jayasaro, etc., and other forest monastics. don't you listen to Sujato, Jayasaro, Ajahn Chah, etc.? That's what I meant in asking. Well, Ajahn Chah's dead, so no, I don't listen to him. And I actually don't listen to anybody's Dhamma talks, to be honest, but I do frequently have conversations with actually the people that you're mentioning, as well as others. So one of the little perks of being a monastic is that it's actually much easier to have personal relationships and personal correspondence with senior monastics. So I have personal correspondence with Bhante Sujato, with actually lots of, I don't even want to start listing names, it's going to take too long. So that I find much more interesting, rather than listening to Dhamma talks, which are meant for a broad public audience, is instead directly communicating with them about topics of Dhamma Vinaya. That I find much more beneficial, and that I do frequently. So Louisa says, for Tan Wade, how long can you clear your mind with no thoughts while meditating before another thought pops up?
Well, Louisa, this is like, if you ask such a personal question, is, do I know you, Louisa? It's like, have we met? I think where this is coming from, of course, is that when people ask these questions, monastics, what they're asking is like, so hypothetically for monastics, what is it like to be a monk, kind of thing? So kind of a basic kind of question. What is it like to be a bhikkhu or a bhikkhuni and to practice in that kind of a lifestyle, you know? And what kind of results can one expect if they, for example, if they practice a lot of meditation or something like this, you know? And so this is quite specific. How long can you clear your mind with no thoughts? Okay, well, meditating before another thought pops up, and this would it's also kind of an interesting question from another point of view, because it would vary widely from time period to time period. So. Yeah, so as I mentioned before, it's like sometimes you go through. If you're practicing for many years, you feel like, you know, overall it seems like the defilements are going down and going down, becoming your mind becomes calmer and calmer, and you become smarter about your defilements and so on like this, and your thinking and stuff like this. But then sometimes you can be really surprised. Boy, I can't believe how mad I got at that guy. Or I can't believe how embarrassed I got when I said that really dumb thing online at the live stream or something. So, so you go through different periods and have different experiences, but overall we find that the practice is very rewarding. I've never met a meditator who meditated for a very substantial period of time who didn't recommend that everyone really take up meditation, try to practice as much as they can.
Yeah. And Hasanta says, to clarify, I don't doubt the story about Ajahn Chah, but I wonder that was from his own karma, and the relatives were generating their own karma. Is both good karmas separate? I think this is a follow-up to your earlier thread about merit sharing.
Okay, let me double check, make sure I understand. This is to clarify, I don't doubt the story. I wonder whether that was from his own. Okay, so is it possible that actually the reason he recovered from malaria was because of some good karma he had, and the making merit and sharing merit with Ajahn Chah was his relatives' own good karma, and so they simply had their own good karma, but his recovery was based on his good karma. Well, the point of the story was told by one of the master teachers in Thailand who was a disciple of Ajahn Chah's, and the moral of the story he was trying to convey was that actually there are cases in which sharing merit can help someone recover from an illness, and that's actually the direct result of receiving the merit shared with them by someone else. So.
Okay. And Happy Smiley says, can I say that we are energy, EMF waves, transformation, brain impulses, experience, and our mano, chitta, vijnana mind? No, you cannot say that. No. And you can say whatever you want. I just have no idea what you mean by that. So, no. Julie asks, did the Buddha say something about sharing merits with someone with wrong livelihood, or someone who is not following the 5 precepts? For example, someone who fishes, who misleads, or an abusive person. We may not know this about the person with whom we share merits. Well, as I said earlier, you should feel free to share merits with everyone. Everybody needs a bit of help. If you only share merit with absolutely perfect beings, well, that sharing merit with arhants, I mean, they don't need it. So actually the people who kill beings and mislead people and abuse people, they actually need merit more than anybody else. Those are the ones who are really lost in their own defilements and delusions, and really need a shining light to help guide them out. And one of the perks of sharing merit is you can do it from a safe distance. So you don't need to put yourself in harm's way. You can just quietly wish, may that awful person receive the blessings of my practice, and may they develop the wisdom and the self-restraint to cultivate better conduct. And may they eventually attain the happiness of full awakening, far away from me. So it's perfectly fine to, in fact, I'd recommend, if you know someone in your life who's got bad habits, then yeah, share merit with them and wish may they develop wholesome habits. Jason says, are there any specific practices for developing the perception of anicca in meditation? Usually when focusing on a part of the body, I try to notice that the sensations are changing. Yeah.
That's great. Sounds like a great practice right there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the basic practice right there. You just start with that and let it grow deeper and broader. And but yeah, that's the starting point.
Sadhu.
Yeah. And Joseph says, hi, Bhante, are you familiar with the term being ghosted? Do you know this? I haven't heard this.
It doesn't sound good. How does this continue?
It means when somebody like quits all communication with you, like they block you, they no longer text you. You try and text them, but you block.
Sounds great. Because
who's doing it?
And not to be too flippant about it, but actually as somebody who really appreciates silence and solitude, that actually sounds kind of nice. May everyone ghost me.
I think is this usually intended with like negative intent, like they don't like you anymore or something? Okay.
Yeah, like you may be friends with somebody, or maybe I think it comes up sometimes. People feel like you're dating someone or something like that, and then all of a sudden, like you don't even know what happened. It's just like, yeah, they're like ghosts, they're gone.
Yeah, well, that's also just the nature of life, is that people come and go in our lives. So it's actually really dangerous when you meet someone to then think that this person's going to be in my life forever exactly the way they are now, because everything is always changing, and relationships sometimes just suddenly change dramatically or even abruptly terminate overnight. So you cannot rely upon any specific relationship. So every single person that you know, you can remind yourself at any time they might disappear from my life without trace, and that's perfectly fine. Then there's no problem. It's only if you expect people to still be in your life tomorrow, then there's a problem. But if you start with the expectation that literally every single person you know might suddenly disappear overnight, then there's no problem. Cultivate happiness with solitude, happiness with just being alone. Then there's no problem. So anyone who wants to ghost me, again, you're welcome. Anytime, I don't mind. Okay. And Mano says, would you please describe if there is significance in understanding teacher lineages, especially in the Theravada tradition? Teacher lineages? I mean, ultimately, we all come from the lineage of the Buddha. So ultimately, we should all be trying to understand the Buddha's teachings. And so I mean, to some extent, knowing the lineage of a teacher gives you some senses to their style. And sometimes it can help you understand the particular terminology that they use. But ultimately, we should all be trying to follow the Buddha's teachings. The concept of teacher lineage is a much bigger deal in Tibetan Buddhism. And to a lesser degree, it's important in certain branches of Mahayana. But even there, not so much. It's really in Tibetan Buddhism where they place a huge deal on teacher lineage. And that's because of the concept of secret teachings. The idea that sometime, a very, very long time ago, an enlightened being passed on a secret teaching that's not written down anywhere. And that secret teaching was handed from teacher to student over the centuries until eventually it reaches you. So in that case, if you're doing the secret Vajrayana practices, then yes, teacher lineage is something important. But in Theravada, it's not really a thing, because Theravada is, for the most part, an exoteric school, which means that everything is completely open. There's no concept of secret teachings or hidden instructions. We really just try to do what the Buddha taught, which is all publicly available. So I don't think it's really that important in Theravada. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Right, no, I think it's sufficient. I mean, that's good for the question.
And Karna has more questions on merit sharing. I'm glad we switched from celibacy to merit sharing. I was a bit worried when the first several questions were all about celibacy. So Karna says, does merit sharing count more if you had an authentic, heartfelt sense of goodwill to the ones you are sharing with? Sharing with all beings everywhere seems more abstract than someone we know. Okay, what do you think?
Okay. Well, I think that, okay. So I said that a lot of what I'm saying about sharing merit comes from what I've heard from teachers, and I think that what I found from teachers is, actually I had a question like this once. I asked a teacher a question like this once, is that when we get to this kind of level, we don't have to think too much about it. Basically, as the Thais would say, we don't have to think a lot. So this is how it would be directly presented. So it's kind of in my head, I'm translating this, how to talk with Americans about this, or whoever, maybe, I'm not sure what nationality. But so once I was asking a teacher, I said, well, you're saying you share merit with common creditors, but I don't know who my common creditors are. Can you tell me who my common creditors are? That would make it easier for me to share merit with them. And he says, no, you don't have to know who your common creditors are. Just think that you're sharing merit with your common creditors. Okay. And I think that maybe this kind of a question would come into it. Perhaps it would be more effective sharing merit if you also had a feeling of goodwill towards someone. I can't say that I really know, but in general, having a feeling of goodwill is very skillful. And so that should be better, but it's also still good to share merit anyway. On the side of sharing merit with all beings being abstract, or sharing merit with common creditors, for example, someone we may not even know, they say that the mind has the ability to do these kinds of things. As I said, I can't say I know myself, but the masters encourage us and say you can share loving kindness with all living beings and share merit in these kinds of things. And even if you don't know them and you don't know who they are and things like this, that the heart has this ability.
Great. And let's see. So Amaranta says, what would you recommend to me? I have the tendency to magnify things. Even when my practice has helped me, still it has an impact on my health sometimes. I don't understand magnify things. Magnify, like make things seem bigger than they are, maybe?
Okay.
Like take things too seriously, maybe? One thing that's actually good to keep in mind is that you're going to die. So whatever experience you're having right now is, by comparison, pretty insignificant. Actually, I use the recollection of death whenever I notice myself getting caught up in something petty. I just remind myself, like, death. We're all going to die. And it's just like, oh, why am I getting so worked up about something relatively minor? And then it just kind of loses its significance. And also, if you notice that it has a negative effect on your health, then when you catch yourself, you can also remind yourself, like, oh, I'm actually harming my health over something that's not even that big of a deal. Maybe I should just drop this and move on with my life. So bring the mind back to contentment and peacefulness. Okay. And Jazzle says, how do we make the most merit?
How to make the most merit? Wow.
Yep, you're the merit master. So
how do we make the most merit? Let's see how literally you take this question. So according to the Theravada tradition, there are 10 forms of merit making. And see, I'm not sure if I can remember them all off the top of my head. I'm running through them, trying to run through them. So we have, and I think that they say that the highest would be bhavana, so it's meditation practice. Okay. And so the masters would recommend, try to meditate and keep meditating and meditate a lot. In order to meditate, we have to have a good sila, okay, and we have to have kind of right view about how we're meditating. Okay. In order to develop qualities like these, we also should have a generous heart. We have to practice some generosity. And so, while bhavana may be the highest merit, it's also good to develop a range of good qualities and have a range of practices. This also helps in regard to the question before about the practice sometimes feeling stale or stagnant. If we have a variety of practices in our life, then it keeps some spice in it.
okay. And Kumo says, I just finished reading the Majjhima Nikaya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Very good. Learned so much and we'll read again one day. What should be next, Samyutta or Anguttara? I would recommend the Samyutta. So first, congratulations on making it through the Majjhima Nikaya. This is a huge step towards a deeper understanding of the Buddha's teachings. Yeah, I would recommend next the Samyutta Nikaya. Really, either one is okay. You can't really go wrong between Samyutta and Anguttara. They're both great. But of the two, I think I like the Samyutta slightly more. So I'd probably lean towards that one. Yeah, what do you think, Samyutta or Anguttara?
Oh, Samyutta is very interesting. I wonder. Okay, so maybe I wonder. Personally, I have an inclination. This is about personal preferences, I guess. So I have a personal preference towards sometimes reading some of the poetry, like in the Sutta Nipata, or in the actually remember probably the Khuddaka Nikaya. But so maybe like the Sutta Nipata or the Dhammapada sometimes, and I think it was standing in quite some contrast to the Majjhima Nikaya. So yeah, so maybe see if you like that too, I guess.
Okay. And Sud says, is it right speech to practice kind speech despite not feeling kind in mind? Would these still count as bodily and verbal acts of kindness? Is this faking till you make it useful, or is this dishonesty?
Okay.
I definitely think it's useful. So practicing kind speech will actually, well, one, then you're not making bad karma. You're making good karma by practicing kind speech. And also over time, it will tend to make your mind more kind and gentle. So it does work. When you make a deliberate effort to do verbal and physical acts of kindness, then that will tend to start influencing your mind. It will tend to start making the mind a bit more kind and gentle as well. And that's certainly been my experience. Yeah. Okay, and Just John says, how do you handle people that try to take advantage of you? What do you think?
Let's see. Well, one of the basic qualities is having some mindfulness, so you can mindfully discern what's going on in the present. People that are trying to take advantage of you. So that's a very basic kind of answer. This general. This serves as kind of a foundation for action in the present and how to deal with situations. And we develop our mindfulness through having a formal meditation practice. It's something that really takes practice to develop, so that we can assert it in times when we need it. That's one thing. Yeah. Another thing is feeling perfectly justified in kind of standing your ground, and having kind of a solid center to yourself. One way you can develop this is through a good practice of sila. Sila, as in the sutras, for example, is a basis for having a self-confidence. Because you have the self-control to keep your sila, meaning your morality, your own moral code, then you have this strength within you. You have this confidence, so you feel better about standing your own ground in various situations, for example. So those are two things I can recommend.
Okay. And Yudi says, a few weeks ago, I tried to help an old lady cross the street, but she yelled and told me to go to hell. Ajahn Chah says the Dhamma is all around us. How can I see Dhamma from this experience? Well, first off, I would just say that we never really know what's going on for somebody else. So maybe you thought she wanted someone to help her, but maybe she actually didn't want someone to help her. Maybe some people have a strong sense of self-reliance and find it difficult to receive help from other people. Or maybe she was just in a really bad mood. Maybe she was sick or in pain or something and expressed that verbally. Or maybe she has Tourette's syndrome, or who knows. The truth is you have absolutely no idea what was going on for that person. Nonetheless, if you sincerely tried to help somebody out of goodwill, then you made exclusively good karma in that situation. And for the other person, well, all we really know for sure is that that other person is experiencing dukkha. So we can just wish for them to be free of dukkha, even as we don't understand the exact nature of their dukkha. And you can still be confident in the knowledge that you were trying to do a good deed, and forgive the other person for acting in a way that was surprising or upsetting for you. Okay. And that's the last question online. Are there any questions from the audience here? Anyone here at the monastery have questions or comments? No? There's another question here. Just John says, is it mindful to realize that I'm a being of nature who has the natural right to stand his ground against aggressors? Do you want to take that follow up to your earlier question?
Well, I think well, it's this is I don't know if technically this would be considered a form of mindfulness, but if you're trying to interact with the with your thoughts and your emotions in the situation mindfully, being skillful, and that's certainly good. And if you're finding that it's bringing about a good result for you, it certainly sounds like a good thing to do. So I'd say sadhu on that. I guess if you're finding it works for you, in general, in the practice of Dhamma, it is recommended that it takes some experimentation at how to deal with each particular situation in life, because every situation actually in turn is unique, and so this kind of an interest in experimenting and finding what works for you is a good position to be in. So.
Okay. And Joseph, continuing on the whole ghosting thing, says, would it be wrong to try reconnecting to make peace? How can I reconcile and make peace with this loss and solitude? It's harder than if they had died because there's the hope of reconnection. I can best honor the friend that I lost with my practice. So, again, just give up hope. Give up any hope of reconnecting with this person. If they don't want a connection with you, then you can't force it to happen. So just drop it and get on with your life. I can't even begin to count the number of people that have passed through my life. And it doesn't matter. People come and go. That's the nature of life. And the ones who are real, genuine friends will stay with you for a long time. The ones who are not will pass through your life and then disappear. And you may never hear from them again. That's okay. Let it go. And Sud says, can demerit also be transferred? For example, demerit of father or forefathers affecting their offspring and so on. Tan Wade?
Okay, well, that is an interesting question, right? We're getting into a lot of details here. Can demerit be transferred? For example, do merits of father or forefathers affecting their offspring? Oh, I see. So, okay. At first, I didn't quite understand the question. So this is about. Actually, I think we heard a question about this maybe last night or something sort of related. I can't remember when, but so do can children experience the negative karmic consequences of their own parents' actions? And I'm not sure that would technically be considered karma. And I haven't actually personally heard any teachings on this one way or another. But my understanding is no, that while, for example, parents can share merit with their children, and children can share merit with their parents, that the actual karmic consequences of a parent's actions would not be received by the children.
And Anjan says, most of the time my breathing is somewhat labored because of blocked nose and sinus problems. Trying breath meditation thus makes me somewhat agitated. Should I only concentrate on body scan? So you just listed 2 meditation techniques out of hundreds of options. So no, you're not restricted to only doing body scanning for the rest of your life. You can just do any of the hundreds of other meditation techniques that there are in the world. So explore, experiment, learn about a bunch of different meditation techniques and try out a bunch of different things. You might be surprised. You might find something that's really interesting for you. For example, I had heard about the 6 elements meditation for years before I first actually tried it. And then I was like, oh, wow, this is actually really interesting. This is a really enjoyable way to practice meditation, and it produces some really interesting experiences. So learn, study, experiment, see what happens. If you don't like breath meditation, nobody's forcing you to do breath meditation. And if you don't like breath meditation, then that doesn't mean you're restricted to only body scanning for the rest of eternity. And Joe says, really stuck on this question here, Joe. How can I best honor the friend that I lost with my practice? By letting go and moving on. Because this attachment and holding on and grudge bearing is not doing you any good, and it's not doing them any good. So just drop it and move on. If you think about the person, then you can just wish for them to be happy and drop it and move on. And that's the last question. You have a question?
Yes, a bit. So in one of like the chants, there's like a text that says, not to associate with the foolish, but to associate with the wise.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like a question that I've actually always had, but I'm training it right now because, like I've noticed that like that's what I've been trying to do, but then when I noticed that like if I associate with people who might have foolish behavior, I mean like of course I still have foolish behavior myself too, but like if it's like really like really there, like it's obvious, but you also see like a good, like you see good in them. How I guess like how do I know like not to like if I should associate with them or not? You still see like potential good in the person, like they're like for example, like I had this friend that I used to work with, and like she was living with her girlfriend, and her like basically there was like every day like she would tell me these stories how like there's a lot of like chaos that goes in their house, make the house like people just do whatever they want and like smoke and just like say crazy things to each other. And she knows that's not really wholesome, but she also doesn't know what else to do. So I see like there's like a lot of anger in her, but like because some people don't know more like the Dhamma, like how how would I know the balance of like not like getting caught up into it, but like also kind of sharing around
So you asked several different questions, which are all somewhat related, but not really. So this makes things challenging because it's hard to actually do justice to every question that you asked. So first off, yes, the Buddha said not to associate with fools, instead to associate with wise people. And you judge this through the effect on your own practice. So when you spend time with people A, B, and C, does that lead to more wholesome mind states and less unwholesome mind states? Then that's good. If it leads to less wholesome mind states and more unwholesome mind states, then you probably want to reduce your contact with those people, or even avoid contact with them, maybe even ghost them. And as for somebody else who associates with a lot of unwholesome people, well, sometimes you can gently point out to them that that's what's going on, that they're associating with unwholesome people who are having a negative impact on them. But ultimately, you cannot live somebody else's life and you cannot make their choices for them. And it's especially challenging if somebody is not Buddhist. If they don't have Buddhist values, then they may not even care particularly. So you can try to point these things out, but it's not always going to be received. Or somebody might hear it but not act accordingly. So if you offer that kind of advice to someone, you need to do it with equanimity because you can't control their choices. Okay. And Sud says, did the Buddha ever talk about whether someone can guarantee stream entry at the end of one's life? There is no way to guarantee stream entry at the end of your life. I'm sorry. So you can try to attain stream entry at some point during this life, but stream entry is the guarantee. And there's this anomalous thing the Buddha mentions in a few places of the faith follower and the Dhamma follower, but that's a more complicated issue. So you might say that those are people on the path to stream entry. But then, again, it just amounts to more or less the same thing. So it's reaching that point of no return. So I'll actually give you the answer that my own preceptor gave me many, many years ago when I asked him a similar question. He said, follow the Noble Eightfold Path. I asked him, how do I attain stream entry? And he answered, follow the Noble Eightfold Path. So that's what you do. That's the last question online, and we're running out of time unless there's one last quick question. Anything else? Okay, maybe that's enough for this evening. So we can go ahead and end the session at this time.
Handamayang Dhammagathaya Sadhukaram Dadamase
Sadhu, 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 anumodam.